Hi, I just wanted to thank you all for getting on. We have a couple more minutes. We're waiting on a few more attendees. We have quite a good turnout today, so I want to make sure everyone gets on. So just hang in there with us and we'll start in a few minutes. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and we'll get started. I don't know if everybody is on, but I did want to thank you all for attending our little talk today. We are doing our little talk on Alzheimer's and dementia. And with us today, we have Sarah and Angel, who are from the Alzheimer's Association here in Colorado. We have a lot of questions came in through emails, and I know both Sarah and Angel have quite a good presentation to give us. So I'm really not going to chat much more. I'm going to let them really take over. We will have time at the end of this presentation for questions and answers. So as attendees, you have some options as far as letting me know that you do have some questions. We're in a webinar situation, so we kind of immediately just make sure everyone's microphone is shut down so we don't have weird feedback. You can use an option of raising your hand and then I will unmute you, or you can actually go ahead and put it in the chat. And I will also keep an eye on that, and I will also answer, ask those questions for you. So a couple options for you to put questions out there to both Sarah and Angel. So at the end, they can provide hopefully some good answers for you. But without further ado, Sarah and Angel, thank you guys.
Great. Thank you, Tanya, for having us. And my name is Angel Hoffman. I'm the Regional Director of Northern Colorado for the Alzheimer's Association. And my office is in Larimer County, but I serve a total of 7 counties, so north going to the Utah border.
Hi, and I'm Sarah Gostinek, Regional Director for Northeast Colorado. So covering Weld, Logan, Morgan counties and more, and very happy to be here along with Angel too, so thanks.
So we'll get started here, and you'll see our vision. I'll let Sarah get started here. So our vision is a world without Alzheimer's disease and all other dementia. That's a lofty vision, we know. And just to tell you quickly a little bit about our organization, the Alzheimer's Association started back in 1980 with Dr. Jerome Stone. His wife had Alzheimer's disease, and there really wasn't much support. There wasn't much really known about the disease during that time. And so he started our organization, and really it was a grassroots organization across the country. We are now in all 50 states. We were a little hodgepodgey offices doing our own thing. And then really probably 10 or 15 years ago became very strategic about our mission and looking at reaching our goal of either stopping dementia, Alzheimer's disease, or at least being able to treat it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the research a little later on, but that's kind of how we got started. We can go to the next slide. So when we think about, oftentimes the question we get asked the most, what's the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease? Because oftentimes those words are used interchangeably. And dementia is really a compilation of symptoms. It's not a disease unto itself. So people will think about memory problem often is the most common type of dementia. And whoops, I'm not sure where our...
And I forgot how to make it bigger. I don't usually share the slides.
Slide, and then from the beginning, if you go to from the beginning, go back to slide.
There we go. Okay.
There we go.
Now we're good. Sorry about that.
That's all right. And so, so Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. Dementia is not only memory problems, it involves problems with reasoning, judgment, personality changes, reasoning, logic. All of those things are dementia symptoms. And then you'll see on your screen on the right-hand side, that's the different pathology. Each one of these are a different disease process. So each one of these have a different pathology in the brain that's making those dementia symptoms occur. Now, sometimes there are dementia symptoms that can be reversible because it's not one of these other disease processes, something else is going on. So maybe someone's had a low B12 or low thyroid, or they're depressed. Those different things can actually mimic dementia symptoms, and they are reversible. So it's really to figure out the why and what's going on. So Alzheimer's disease in particular is hallmarked by two proteins, beta amyloid and tau. That's the disease process that's happening in the brain. Vascular dementia is where someone may be having, it has to do with your vascular health. So maybe someone's having a transischemic attack or a little mini stroke, we might call it. And it's a series of those that just keep happening. With Alzheimer's disease, we often think of kind of a slow decline. Vascular dementia may be more stair-steppy. So someone will be at this level, they'll have a little vascular accident, they'll decline very suddenly, then they'll be stable for a while, they'll have another little vascular accident. And so it's just very kind of a stair-step kind of decline. Dementia with Lewy body is hallmarked by a protein called alpha-synuclein. And oftentimes in the beginning, it's not memory problems that are actually the hallmark of Lewy body dementia, but more a person might be experiencing hallucinations. They may be acting out in their sleep when they're dreaming. They may experience delusions. They actually may have what we call apraxia, so having a hard time moving their body in space. So if you're asking someone to sit in a chair, that may be very difficult because that brain-body connection is being challenged. We know now that the comedian Robin Williams suffered from dementia with Lewy body. He didn't know that, when he was living, but on autopsy, they discovered that. Frontal temporal dementia affects the frontal and temporal lobes. And so a person, kind of a hallmark of this disease could be personality changes. Someone either will start to experience apathy or maybe some quote unquote behavior issues, which we try not to use those words, but so the frontal lobe is being affected, which is that executive functioning. Oftentimes people will be diagnosed with frontal temporal dementia a little bit earlier, so maybe in their 50s and 60s. And certainly you can develop any of these dementias, earlier in life as well. Also, Huntington's chorea has a dementia component as well. And then something called mixed dementia, which can be a combination of dementias. So again, all of these have unique pathologies that are happening in the brain for those dementia symptoms to occur. And I'm going to let Sarah just talk about some of the warning signs for dementia.
And this is actually one of our classes that we have online and community presentations. And we use too, so the warning signs of Alzheimer's. This is, please note that it's not necessary to have all of these signs in order to seek a diagnosis. So some people just experience one or more of these in varying degrees. So number one, memory loss that disrupts daily life. This is the most common sign of Alzheimer's, especially in the early stage. So this is forgetting recently learned information usually. And you might see people start asking the same questions repeatedly. But a typical age-related change would be sometimes forgetting names and appointments, but remembering them later. And then number two, challenges in planning and solving problems. So again, looking at maybe problems with a familiar recipe, keeping track of monthly bills, or just taking a lot longer perhaps. And a typical age-related change would be occasionally making errors, such as bills. Difficulty completing a familiar task. Again, this is a very routine, such as driving to a familiar location. And a typical age-related example would be maybe needing help with the remote or microwave settings, something not quite as routine. Confusion to time and place. So this is an example would be maybe losing track of the seasons or forgetting where you are and how you got there. And a typical age-related example would maybe getting confused about the day of the week, but then figuring it out later. Trouble with visual images and spatial relationships. So vision problems can certainly affect balance, may have problems reading or trouble judging distance and color spatial relations. So this obviously would be problematic with driving. And a typical age-related example would be maybe vision problems due to cataracts. Problems with word finding. So this could be maybe forgetting in the middle of a conversation how to continue with that conversation or repeating yourselves. And a typical age-related example would be sometimes just trying to find the right word. And then misplacing things and unable to retrace your steps. So sometimes we see with people leaving things in very unusual places, and also accusing others of stealing. This also especially happens as the disease progresses. And typical age-related would be misplacing time to time, but you're able to retrace your steps and find that object. Number 8, we've got, let's see, increasing poor judgment. So sometimes we see this with money management or with hygiene, keeping yourselves clean. And typical age-related would be a bad decision or mistake once in a while, such as remembering to get your oil changed. Changes in mood or personality. So sometimes you might see someone getting more confused or suspicious or depressed, especially if they're feeling out of their comfort zone. And typical age-related is sometimes if you're getting stuck in routines, and you might get a little irritable if that routine gets disrupted. And lastly, withdrawal from social activities. So this could certainly, if someone is having trouble following along in a conversation, they might not feel comfortable to be in as many social settings, or they're having trouble following along with a team or a sport that they really liked. And how to decrease your risk. So you'll note that many of these are very similar to what we're told to prevent other diseases such as cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and Parkinson's. So we are following the same guidelines for heart health because heart and brain are interrelated. So number one, get moving. It could be really just anything you enjoy and are more apt to do again. And if you're not in an exercise routine, just starting small and really building from there, but really trying to get your heart rate up. And keep stress in check. So definitely things like Tai Chi, yoga, meditation, and breathing can help. And monitor your numbers. So we're really blood pressure, blood sugar, weight, and cholesterol are important to track. And then the stop smoking if you're a smoker and limit alcohol use. And healthy eating, again, this is very similar to the heart health diet. So if you're not familiar with Mediterranean DASH diet, these are diets that are rich in fish and olive oil or other healthy oils, nuts, fruits, and vegetables. So lower sodium and sugar and less red meat and processed foods. So there is a strong social relationships with increased physiological effect. So, maintaining those relationships with family and friends is important for positive moods and just really the emotional support and what we learn from each other. And then just being involved in your community, whether that's volunteering or just maintaining your skills, being out in the community and involved is good for cognitive health. And more cognitive stimulation. So, increasing the blood flow to the brain. Alzheimer's does destroy brain cells, so we want to do all that we can. So really the use it or lose it mentality is both the exercise as well as our cognitive stimulation. So that could look like, keeping your mind active with puzzles, anything that you could read that challenges and inspires you, maybe learning a new hobby. Those are all very important. So keeping your mind active forms new connections among brain cells. And I believe Angel, you can take over.
Yeah, and just kind of to build on what Sarah was talking about, that cognitive stimulation, we know that what we call cognitive resiliency, and I don't know if anyone's heard of the nun study, but the nun study really evaluated a group of nuns, and on autopsy, they were able to look at, their brains and found that some people actually had those hallmarks of plaques and tangles, but did not present outwardly with Alzheimer's disease. And one of the reasons why they think that occurred is because they had really built up cognitive resiliency. So almost everything that Sarah was talking about, these nuns were doing. They exercised every day. They often meditated. They had a healthy diet. They were really in, they had a social group. So they had their tribe, their people, and they also just were actively between the meditation and just learning new things. They actually built those increased neuronal connections, which is really important. Our brains like to get lazy. And so the more that we can do to challenge our brains, if you're really good at a crossword puzzle, you've probably gotten really good at a crossword puzzle. And so maybe trying something that is really challenging your brain. Obviously, we've heard that, learning a new instrument or learning a new language can be really helpful to our brains. But anything, even little things that we can do to challenge our brain is just really, really important and very good for our brains. So I am going to move on to some research and talk about research. We have something called the Alzheimer's Association International Conference every year. We've been doing this, I'm not sure how many years now, but it happens every summer. And this is a time when you might hear things start coming out in the news about the latest research in Alzheimer's disease. And it's because of this conference is happening. This year, we had over 99 countries represented and over 10,000 people attend and over 600 research presentations done. And we are the largest nonprofit funder of research around the world. We are third only to the US government and the Chinese government. And oftentimes when we talk about research, people think, oh, we're just talking about pharmacology or medications. And it's much more than that. There are a variety of research happening around the world, whether it's how to improve someone living with dementia and their psychosocial well-being. I listened to a study recently that was done through an emergency department. So when someone comes in living with dementia, how do we help decrease their risk for delirium? Because delirium is a big deal when someone enters a hospital for anybody, but especially someone living with dementia. So what are some steps that physicians and emergency departments can take to lower a person's risk for delirium? And it can also be a couple of interesting studies that came out this year. And this is probably no surprise to anyone, especially when Sarah was talking about diet, but highly processed foods, if people have a diet of, highly processed foods, you have an increased risk for dementia. So our diet is really important, and looking at the Mediterranean diet, as Sarah mentioned, and also the DASH diet, which is Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension from the American Heart Association. And as Sarah mentioned, that, usually diet, you're also impacting, your risk for diabetes, cancer, heart disease. So you get a lot of bang for your buck when we really focus on our diet. Another interesting study was with something called mild cognitive impairment. And that is a kind of a precursor to full-blown dementia. So people with mild cognitive impairment don't always end up in full-blown dementia, but everyone in dementia has gone through mild cognitive impairment first. And so with this study, what they found was that people, they had two control groups. One was a group that did aerobic exercise, and then the other group actually did things like stretching and balance exercises. Think of like yoga and Tai Chi and walking. So not really like hard aerobic exercise. And the researchers were actually surprised. And again, these are people with mild cognitive impairment, not full-blown dementia. But they found out in a year's time that neither one of those groups, both the aerobic exercise and the people that were doing the stretching and balance, had no significant cognitive decline. That's pretty huge. That tells us that it's really important to just get our body moving and use our body. I think the researchers were a little surprised. They thought that the people with the aerobic exercise would actually do better, but there was actually no difference. But what was really interesting is then they compared that to a group that were sedentary, and that group did show significant decline. So again, the message is that we really need to be moving in some manner. We don't have to run a marathon, but we do have to, it's important to, stretch and make sure that we are moving our body in some way, whether again, it's the aerobic exercise or stretching and balance exercises. So that was a really interesting study. So a lot of studies come out of this Alzheimer's Association International Conference every year. If that's something that you're interested in, we also have a free app that you can download for your phone if you have a smartphone, called the Science Hub, and that again is free, and that just updates. You can look on it occasionally and it tells you the latest research information that's coming out. So that's another thing that you can do if you want to be up to date on the latest research. A lot of just really interesting research. Recently, just a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was even just last week, that, and this hasn't been duplicated yet, but that a multivitamin might be helpful for us to decrease our cognitive risk. So again, the research is really updating all the time. And what's really exciting is that, for a long time, we didn't have a lot of funding for research. And so there wasn't a lot of gains being made. But now we're working with, again, research around the world, the National Institute of Health, and we do have funding. And so you're starting to really see some changes occur. So that's really exciting. It's really an exciting time for researchers, and hopefully in the near future, we'll have a lot of things helpful for people living with dementia. We can go to the next slide, Sarah. So how do I support my loved one if I suspect dementia? Maybe I suspect it, but we're not there yet. We don't have a diagnosis yet. What do I do? What are some of the things that can be helpful? The 10 signs that Sarah talked about, we did it kind of quickly today. That's really a whole hour-long class where we talk about the signs in depth. And then, what's the process to get a diagnosis? And how do I talk to my loved one about that? And what we know, we typically get phone calls that say, I'm pretty sure my mom or dad or whoever has dementia, but they're just in denial. And they might be, because that's like a heavy thing, right? To have a diagnosis of dementia. It's scary. But on the flip side of that, we also know from research that it takes a certain amount of brain health to be aware of what's going on in our body. So it also could be that that person no longer has the brain health to be aware of their challenges. And so what are some things that, and that's really challenging for a caregiver, right? If your loved one who you think has dementia and they just don't recognize it, what are some things or some tactics that you can use to get a diagnosis? And we do encourage a diagnosis for many reasons. One, I talked about, someone might have something that's reversible. So it's really important to figure out the why this is happening. And then if someone does have a type of dementia, somewhere down the road, you may need to, if you have long-term insurance, access your long-term insurance, or there may be reasons why you need that diagnosis to be official. We also know that medications, for example, with Alzheimer's disease in the early stage, aren't really good for people with dementia with Lewy body. So figuring out the nuances of what's going on can be really helpful. So if you're going to have a conversation with your loved one, we just really encourage you to write down your observations of what you're seeing in a very non-judgmental, non-emotional way. And, keep a list of that, because two things, one, things may be happening much less than you thought, or maybe they're actually happening more than you thought. So be very specific about what you're noticing. And then to share those concerns with your loved one. I've noticed that you've been doing this. And that could trigger some anger for sure. And sometimes knowing who that person is to deliver that message with your loved one is important as well. For example, I have a great relationship with my mother, but I also know that sometimes she listens to my sister better. So maybe my sister is the one that delivers that conversation and it's not me. Who is the right person in the family to deliver and share those concerns? And then really offer to go to the doctor with that person if you're seeking a diagnosis. And you want to share those observations with a physician because, physicians are seeing someone just a snapshot in time. And oftentimes people can kind of pull it together for a short period of time. And a physician will be like, no, I think they're fine. But doing that, having the kind of long term of what you're seeing and writing that down and sharing it with the physician can be really helpful. The other thing is that if you're at a doctor appointment and your person is experiencing dementia, then you can hear what the doctor is saying because your loved one might not be able to relay that back to you. We also really want to help destigmatize dementia. There is still a stigma out there. And I did a workshop in Steamboat yesterday, and one of the gentlemen came up to me. His wife had been diagnosed back in the spring, and he said, she does not want to go outside. She doesn't want to see our family or friends. She's really isolating herself because she's embarrassed. She has nothing to be embarrassed about, right? This is a brain disease. And the more that we don't share what's going on with people, then we don't allow people to come and support us. And I think about cancer, many years ago. In fact, I was recently, a few months ago, watching The Crown, if anyone's watched that. And King George was diagnosed with cancer and nobody told him. And we used to do that. We used to not tell people that they had cancer. And so someone is experiencing these physical issues and being isolated. We don't allow people to have support. And now it's the opposite, right? Someone gets diagnosed with cancer. Oftentimes they might have like a head shaving party if they're going through chemo. We we allow people to support us and wrap their arms around us. And we need to do the same thing with dementia. So the more that we can destigmatize the disease and share with others about what's going on and allowing other people to help can really help that individual plus the care partner, because sometimes it can be an isolating disease. And if you are the care partner, to educate yourself, because we have so many community resources, depending on where you live, whether if you're here in Larimer County, through our Office on Aging, we have social groups, we have things like Dementia Together, which does memory cafes, we have something called OK Corral, which is a singing group. There are lots of different communities to be able, and organizations to come together and support the person, the care partner, and the person living with dementia. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And then if you are a person living with dementia, how do you live well with dementia? Oftentimes when someone gets a diagnosis, the family and the person think of the very end stage of the disease. And that is, there's many years that are in between and many years to live well. And so doing things just like we talked about, those 4 pillars, that exercise, cognitive stimulation, the diet, and socialization, those things won't stop the disease for someone living with dementia, but they will certainly help you live better and have a better quality of life. Staying active is really important. And I talked about that study where just moving your body is really important. Setting up a routine can be really helpful. Just having that same kind of similar routine every day can help really be supportive to that person living with dementia. Prior to working for the Alzheimer's Association, I worked at an adult day program for almost 20 years. And I know that people tended to thrive in the day program, mostly because, well, it was an activity-based program, lots of activities, lots of socialization going on through the day, but we had a routine. And so people knew what to expect. And we served a large group of people, and we would do the same kind of activities in the morning. We'd do exercise before lunch. After lunch, there was a little rest. We had certain activities in the afternoon. So just that routine helps people. We also have what's called an early stage engagement program. So someone who has been pretty recently diagnosed and in the early stages, we have an 11-week class, just kind of a plug for our class. It's October 6th, I think, in Windsor, actually, if anyone is interested to let us know. But we have early stage engagement programs. So helping the person living with dementia as well as the care partner kind of adjust to this new diagnosis and building connections and providing education and resources on that. And then knowing what a person's hobbies are, and maybe you have to modify some hobbies, but you can probably still do them for quite a long time. And so modifying hobbies and looking at, what are your interests? What are things that maybe you can't do right now, but maybe if we just adjust them a little bit, might be helpful to someone. And also doing what we call build your care team. Build that support around you. So you think about the care partner and the person living with dementia kind of at the center of a circle, and then building out from that. So that informal network, who are our family and friends that can help support us through this. Then thinking about your professional team, maybe your medical doctors, what are some professional organizations that are involved, maybe a little help. Having what are those organizations that can kind of provide that support through this journey is really important to really identify and think about that in kind of a formal way. And then share your care wishes. Now, again, if someone is experiencing dementia and they just don't have the wherewithal to recognize it, then some of these things might be challenging, but there are a lot of people that can still who are living with dementia that can still, if not do all of these things can at least do some of these things. So if you are able to express your care wishes, what you would like for the future, what things are important to you, to be able to do that, and obviously making sure this is a time we want to make sure advanced directives are in order. So medical power of attorney, living will, power of attorney, those kind of things are really important to get taken care of. And then we also have something called Trial Match. And Trial Match allows people to be involved in clinical studies. And for some people, that's really important because they feel like they are impacting future generations. And some of these clinical trials are online and you just answer questions. Some of them are maybe like through Anschutz down in Denver. It depends on, where you live and what might be available, and you opt into it. It's something that we have on our website that you sign up for, and then you can see what studies are out there and see if any of them are of interest to you. And they also need healthy brains. So people that don't have dementia, there are also studies, comparative studies as well. And then medications, some medications, you may have heard of Aduhelm, which came out last year through a company called Biogen. And there was some controversy with it. The FDA did approve it. Medicare did not approve it for coverage. It's $56,000 a year, so it's very expensive. It's done through injection. And it seemed to help in the very early stages of that mild cognitive impairment that I talked about, or in the very early stages of Alzheimer's. It is the first medication ever to show removing some of the beta amyloid, which is thought to be a component of Alzheimer's disease. And so that is a brand new medication. It's not the cure-all end-all, but what's exciting is that there are other medications building off that knowledge of medication and coming down the pipeline as well. And so there are other medications that don't stop the disease or stop the progression, but do help with sometimes those neurons talking to one another. In the specific case of Alzheimer's disease, that can be helpful. You may have heard of like Aricept or Namenda or Namzaric. Those medications can be helpful for people sometimes in the early or middle stages. Again, not slowing the progression, but just helping sometimes those neurons connecting a little bit better than they normally would. So those are the different kinds of things that can help someone live well with dementia. And we have on our website has like so much information on it. Sometimes it's hard to navigate, but also we have a whole section on for a person living with dementia, and it's geared specifically for someone living with dementia. At our organization, we do have people living with dementia on an advisory board telling us this information. So it's not us making it up. It's people who have given us feedback who are actually living with dementia. And then Sarah is going to talk about some of our resources here. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Angel. So yes, Angel's right. We have a lot on our website, alz.org, and they do have a search, magnifying glass. I do that all the time to find something that you're looking for. Alzheimer's Navigator, it kind of has different buttons, which avenues, and really helps you create an action plan. And our community resource finder, which if you were to just Google that, it would take you there, or alz.org/CRF. And what that does is you just enter your zip code, and perhaps you're looking for at-home services or memory care units, or it's a wide range of resources you find from that. ALZ Connected, so certainly if you're someone that might benefit from a chat community, that really can help people, especially if maybe it's a very specific group, such as younger onset, with people under age 65 that have dementia and Alzheimer's. And our caregiver center, lots on our website for caregivers, and our safety center, so Medic Alert. Our helpline is tremendous, so it's available 24/7. So again, if you're up at 3 in the morning and you just want someone to talk to, or they can also help register you for our classes or support groups, or act as the community resource finder and line up those things for you too. So We do have bilingual, these are master's level clinicians, and so Spanish and English speaking, and then you can use a language line for up to 200 other languages. And other things, so I mentioned our classes and support groups. So we have a really great mix of keeping things online and either a live format like this or on demand, and then opening up in April. I think we started in person again. So Angel and I both have a lot in our region for both support groups and classes. I think we have about 10 different classes. And we also provide care consultations. So Angel and I meet one-on-one with a family member. Right now, I'm kind of lining up, we're reserving a room at a library because we are searching for a new office right now. So more to come on that, but we are definitely still meeting with families and finding those locations. And let's see, Angel mentioned we have our new early stage program starting October 6th, and those will be Thursdays 3 to 4:30 at the Foundations Church in Windsor. And so for this program, we do ask to have a screening done to make sure it's a good fit. And I think we definitely still have openings. We have 12 will be our cap for, I believe, for the early stage program. So that's a good mix of classes and support groups where we have maybe the whole groups, and then splitting up the people with dementia and the caregivers. And let's see. Also, we have our Walk to End Alzheimer's coming up. So October 1st, we'll have it at Lincoln Park in Greeley, and October 8th at CSU in Fort Collins. So a great event to, just come in and feel the support and learn more and see others in our area that are impacted by this disease. All right, I think that was all I had.
So we'd love to answer questions. If any, we left time for a lot of questions, so hopefully you have some.
All right, I will.
Oh, Tanya.
Tanya, you're muted.
Sorry, chit-chatting away and no one can hear me. Sorry. Go ahead and raise your hand and I will unmute you. And I am keeping an eye on the chat. Right now, I don't see anything in the chat. If anyone does have any questions. Oh, I just saw a hand raised, so hold on, yay. I love this little hand raise.
Did I stop sharing? Sorry.
Oh yeah, you probably could go ahead and stop sharing. So it's Sue is who I'm gonna allow to talk. Sue, go ahead.
Sure. Can you hear me?
We can.
I'm 63 and I'm starting to, both of my parents have dementia, and I'm starting to just really notice the signs of aging that you mentioned, like not being able to bring words to mind and laying things down and not being able to find them. Like, I can't find my good glasses today. I'm just noticing a lot of changes in myself. And I wondered, I don't have insurance. I wondered, is there somewhere that I can go get tested to see if this is normal age decline or if something is starting? I live up in the Aspen area.
In Aspen, did you say?
Yeah.
So there do you have a physician at all?
I do.
Okay. I mean, you can start with your primary care physician. Actually, that's usually where most people start. And there's something called a little mini mental status exam that physicians do. That can be a good baseline. I mean, all of us forget words every now and then. All of us lose something and don't remember where we place something. But yeah, and when we do that and we're in our 60s, we're like, oh my God, you start to really panic. But if you are, if you're worried, it's certainly worth just talking to your physician about it. Because one of the things that we have found, especially as people age, we start to worry about our brain health and we don't share it with our physicians. And often our physicians aren't asking us. But with, you're not quite old enough for Medicare yet, but once you get to be old enough for Medicare, they should do there's a wellness check, and that wellness check should involve the mini mental status exam, but that's something that your primary physician can do. I mean, you can kind of take some of those, the mini mental status exam. It's kind of hard to administer to yourself. So I would really probably encourage you to talk with your primary physician. If you have a, just like a regular checkup or something, that's just probably the best place to start, because if there are more concerns, you're going to have to go through that anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Any other questions? Go ahead and do the raise hand. It's if you just kind of take your mouse and go to the bottom and kind of wave it around, you'll see this option where it says raise your hand. Ooh, more, yay. Okay. Jean, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. So I've got Jean. Oh, maybe.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I'm curious about the research around hereditary components of dementia.
Yes. Sarah, do you want me to take that, or you want to take it, or?
I think you can take it. Thanks.
So we do know that with a close relative, meaning if you have a sibling or a parent, you have an increased risk. So if you do have that in your family, then those things that Sarah talked about to decrease your risk become, important to pay attention to. There are two types of risk or genes. So there's deterministic genes, which mean that there's a few chromosomes that have a mutation, and if you have one of these mutations, you will definitely get Alzheimer's disease. But it's like 1 to 2% of the world's population, so it's very rare. And most families kind of know if they have this gene because it's just so prevalent in their entire family. And a lot of these families are involved in something called the DIAN network, which is dominantly inherited Alzheimer's network. It's a big research study out of Washington University in St. Louis. So, if you have the deterministic gene, like I said, most people know it. Then there's also something called risk factor genes. And so if someone has, for example, and you may have heard of APOE4. We know for people, especially Caucasian people, it's a little bit different for people who are Black. But for Caucasian people who have the APOE4 genes, you get one from each parent. If you have 2 of those, you have an increased risk. Again, it doesn't mean you'll get Alzheimer's disease. It just means you have an increased risk. There are some other risk factors. Age is the greatest risk factor. If you've had a head injury, if you've had multiple head injuries, like the chronic traumatic encephalopathy that we hear that football players or soccer players have, you have an increased risk. And I think prior to us talking, there were actually kind of a list of things that you have put up on your website of increased risk. But those are kind of the 2 things for hereditary, is the deterministic gene and the risk factor gene.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Jean. Let's see. I'm going to Susan. Go ahead. I think I have unmuted you. Oh, wait, hold on. Maybe not. Susan, I did just try to ask you to unmute.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. Thank you. I don't have a question for Angel or Sarah. I did want to say thanks. This was a really informational presentation and was really helpful. But I did have a comment for Tanya. I wanted you to know that the chat is disabled. I know some people feel more comfortable asking questions that way. So just wanted to throw it out there in case it was.
Thank you.
But thank you.
I'll try to make sure I look at that again. Thank you, Susan.
Maybe why there's no questions in the chat.
That could be. Next person I have is Carol, and I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. Go ahead, Carol. It's Carol Rush. If you have a question, you should be unmuted. Carol?
It's like muted still.
Oh, no, you're, oh, wait, was that Carol? I'm going to ask, I'm hitting a little thing that says ask you to unmute. Can you find that?
Okay. All right, now can you hear me?
We can. Thank you, Carol.
Okay. I have a friend who is showing signs of Alzheimer's, and I wonder if you have any ideas about how to approach her about that, and also how to be able to approach her children about it. She has adult children, but I'm a little hesitant to go to them. Because, I think that they're aware of it, but I'm not really sure.
Yeah, oftentimes if you're aware of it and if her children are seeing her enough, they probably have noticed something going on as well. Typically, when someone is experiencing dementia, friends and family are aware that something's going on. And, depending on the relationship that you have with your friend, just coming from a place of caring and saying, and being, again, specific about what you might be seeing and saying, I'm kind of noticing this and, what do you think about it? Having just really an honest conversation, depending on where that person is in their journey. Again, if it's kind of the early stages and you're just noticing it, then, maybe having a just honest heart-to-heart conversation. If you're really worried, concerned about her safety, because sometimes that can happen too, then, talking to the family and just asking, have you noticed anything? I'm kind of worried about some things that I'm seeing, especially if the family aren't involved and, don't see that person very often, then they may not know the changes. Sarah, I don't know if you have anything else to add?
No, I know it can be tricky to start that conversation, but don't have anything else to add to that. But yeah, there's a kind of a template too on our website of if that could help too, kind of an outline. Certain questions you could phrase that way.
The chat should be open
All
now.
right, thank you.
Oh, sorry, Carol. The chat should be open now. If anyone wants to use that. So I'll keep an eye on that and keep an eye for hands raised. I've got Jane who I'm going to go ahead. Okay, Jane.
I just think can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, hi, I'm Jane. I'm in Denver. My mom was diagnosed with MCI in her 80s and then Alzheimer's, of course, dementia. She was in a memory care unit for the last 8 months of her life. My dad was down the hall in an independent living in a studio apartment. He too had a diagnosis of dementia, but he was pretty full functioning, minus terrible memory, of course. But, he could still, well, he finally was asking my brother to take over all his financials and bills, but he was doing well, walking without any assistance, so forth. So my question is, I was not able to go home, and I've been home for a couple of years, so I could not see my mother as she declined. But I heard from after she died, I heard that she was saying, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. She just repetitively said that. And I didn't know it. And I'm a retired RN and I've worked all areas and I've worked oncology and I've worked psych and everything. But I just felt terrible that no one said, Mom, what do you mean? You're going to die. What are you talking about? What are you thinking or feeling? I would have done that. Now that's me, but nobody could do that. My father couldn't. He just was told by a doctor of his, anything she says is Alzheimer's. Don't worry about it. Don't pay attention. I'm like, what? I tried to talk to her. Of course, she could answer questions, but then she'd forget immediately, what she said, but she was so troubled. So I'm asking, my question is convoluted, I know, but what do you make of that? Have you heard that? I mean, do you give credence to that? Because she died. I mean, she soon died, and she curled up and died one morning in her favorite old beat up recliner. And I was the only kid out of 4 that was able to talk to her the night before she died. And I didn't know how really bad she was. My dad is kind of tuned out, and he never really got it, which is sad, but he was there for her. Oh, he was there. And so she, I heard her say, after I talked to her on the phone, she said, she didn't know I could hear her, but she said, I just can't talk to her anymore. And now those were the last words I heard my mother say, I just can't talk to her anymore. And then she died the next morning. And my dad, of course, was shocked out of his mind. Now, she was just about 93. He turned 95, a month later. So they lived a long, long life. But what do you make of that comment? I mean, I listen to it and I give credence to it, but I don't know. Is that got any, have you heard that before?
Was she on hospice care or palliative care or?
Nope. She was in, she had to, she qualified for memory care. She was in Iowa, and they have all these laws. If you have to have constant supervision, you've got to be in memory care. Well, they couldn't give her constant supervision. She couldn't get help to get out of bed. And she laid there and just let herself, I mean, she couldn't turn over, she couldn't dress, she couldn't walk without help. And so they didn't have enough help to help her. So I don't know what good it was, but my dad couldn't be there constantly. So no, she was on none of that. They didn't offer that in a, in a memory care unit. She didn't really, it wasn't an appropriate place. Looking back, she probably needed to be in a nursing home, because she could walk with help. She knew when she had to go to the bathroom, but nobody could help her. And she didn't know to ask to go to the dining room. And, they would come in and get her, but then maybe not get her there. I don't know. It just was it was tough being so long distance and not knowing the details. But my feeling is so strong that I wanted to say more. And of course, I wasn't there. Nobody said anything. They just let it go. They didn't know what to say. And maybe she wouldn't have answered it. My sense is, if I was there and all what I was feeling, she had walked to the dining room and back when my older brother got down there. And she perked up, for him, but she said it repeatedly, because I called and I would talk to them a lot. And she would just say, I don't feel well. I don't feel well. Oh, I don't feel well. I need help. I need help. I need help. I need help. And my dad just blew her off. He tuned her out, and he was hard of hearing, of course, but it just broke my heart. And so I know the repetitive thing is Alzheimer's, but there was some credence to it. I mean, she really wasn't feeling good. I think it was her time. She just had it, and that's it. But had they told us all, there's 4 kids, we're all distant, but my brothers could have flown back, maybe. I don't know. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
Jane, I'm going to put up, I do have one question that
sure.
came up a little bit as well with, because you mentioned the MCI. One did mention if, does MCI always turn into dementia?
Yes. I've asked my neurologist. I have tons of risk factors to develop this, and I read everything I can, and it's like, oh my God. So yes, my neurologist said, well, it's not a given, but you can't have both at the same time. It's a progression. You go from MCI to dementia, and then there's that progression, and then Alzheimer's does whatever it does. Progresses.
So
now
Angel and Sarah, is that a true statement that you're hearing here?
So mild cognitive impairment does not always end up in full-blown dementia, because those mild cognitive impairment symptoms could be for many reasons. And sometimes, as I mentioned, depression, the B12, the thyroid, a brain tumor, I mean, those can be all under mild cognitive impairment. And so those things are addressed, and then that person will not continue to go into full-blown dementia. But everyone in dementia has gone through that stage first, if that makes sense. And Jane, I just want to say, I'm so sorry for your experience. It sounds really distressing as a family member. And, you know, we never want to discount what someone is telling us and just say, oh, they had dementia, they don't know what they're talking about. You know, that it could be from an emotional standpoint, she was saying those things. It could be from a physical standpoint. And, you know, that's just a really a tough situation. And I'm sorry that you experienced that.
Thank you, Angel. Thank you, Jane. I did want to, and I guess it's kind of added on to Jane's a little bit. On your website, do you have an area or a section of, because my mother also has Alzheimer's, where you can see like maybe what the stages are of Alzheimer's as they kind of, you know, I guess worsen, and what you'll see in their personalities and what is going to start to change as the months goes on. Is that something available on your website that to kind of get the knowledge of that?
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because that is definitely one of our ongoing classes that we offer. So we have it in 3 sections. So living with Alzheimer's, early, middle, and late stages. And so in both live formats or on demand. But yeah, those are 3 crucial, because there are a lot of different changes within those stages that and dementia conversations too. So maybe, you know, if you're seeing signs like hallucinations or things, and how to talk with your loved one, or like having those conversations too around if they shouldn't be driving anymore. So those classes are also pertain to those issues. But.
Great. And I will, just so everyone knows, we'll share this recording, as well as, is it okay that we share your presentation and or your contact information, both Sarah and Angel? So if people do want to try to find more, they're not finding stuff on the website, we'll try to give them as much as we can, so they can kind of look for it. Are there any other, let's see, the online resources sound wonderful, someone said, so thank you for your time. Any other hands raised or information that people want to put in the chat? It is just 1 o'clock, but we could take a couple more if anyone does. I'm not seeing anything. Well, first I wanted to thank both of you. It was really informative, and I really do appreciate it. And I will be reaching out to all of the attendees to let you know that we will be putting the recording out. I did also want to thank Kaiser Permanente. They do sponsor these little talks, so thank you to them. We do have a lot of events coming up, and I will be sending those out in an email, but keep an eye out next Monday. I guess on the exercise front, we are doing a free exercise class, so you could kind of get in. It's one of our partners. So maybe help with that cognitive, and that part of that exercise class is they're having you speak and use your brain the entire time while you're doing things. So by all means, sign up for that. And then we will have another chat as well. Our virtual excursions, where we're going to go to the Polynesian Islands, are the 27th or 28th. Jane, looks like Jane maybe raised her hand again. Sorry, hold on a second. Maybe not. Maybe that was a mistake. So anyway, thank you again, and thank you to all of you. I'm really looking forward to possibly continuing this as well. If any of you do feel like you'd like to kind of dig deeper, I have talked to Sarah and Angel that maybe this is something we could do one more after this and talk maybe about the stages of Alzheimer's or things like that. So depending on the questions that maybe come back, would be happy to discuss that as another option where we could extend this a little bit more. I think that's it. I do still see Jane's hand raised.
I know.
Oh, I think she's unmuted, but.
I did. I'm sorry. I'm trying to unmute. I just wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I don't know what I said, but I meant to say my neurologist said you can't have both diagnoses at the same time, MCI and dementia. Not that
Right.
every MCI goes to dementia. But so I don't know what I said looking back. But anyway, my mother supposedly, I just remembered, was at end stage Alzheimer's when she died. So I think that I don't know. We didn't get a whole lot of great information. We're all out of state. So, but thank you for listening. I think it was just a sad situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you again to everyone. And hopefully we'll see you on Monday and at all of our chats from here on out. Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Thanks, Angel.
Bye.